All right. So I just realized I think my mic was muted. So you didn't hear my lovely greeting and my welcome. So I'll do it again. And so I'll have to stop the sharing. I thought I was wondering, what that little red thing was. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Journey to SEA 2025. This is Shelley Ann Edwards Barron, your creative writing specialist, here to talk to you about report writing, narrative writing, and comprehension. And thank you for those of you who are able to take the time out to view the live. If you're looking at the recording, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to hearing from you, your comments about the program, questions that you might have about anything that was shared. And in general, with SCA, if you have any questions, feel free to message me. My number will be up on the screen, WhatsApp messages preferred. And of course, you can find me on Facebook and in SCA, the Peaceful Approach Facebook group, as well as my Facebook page, Wood Coach Youth. And for those of you who are new, and you're wondering who is this lady talking about the creative writing and calling herself a creative writing specialist? Well, my background is in editing and teaching English as a second language. Those are the two core foundation experiences that I have that really inform the way I teach. And I also work with multisensory learning, which is about introducing interactive sessions into the creative writing classroom. Now, of course, most of you would be familiar with, objects and manipulatives for math and science and social studies. We do all these projects and different things. But somehow, when it comes to creative writing, we kind of say, well, okay, this is writing, so that's as hands on as they need to get. That is not the best approach. And what I've noticed is that we often don't teach creative writing in a very interactive, detailed way. And that is what I believe accounts for so many students struggling at SEA and beyond when it comes to writing. Many students actually grow to hate writing because of the experiences that they've had at school and even at home working on their creative writing. So my program, Journey to SEA 2025, and all the resources that I create and share through my website, woodcoach.com, they are meant to assist students in getting what they need in terms of the skills, but also specifically to present it in a way that students can appreciate and may actually enjoy. And so let's get to looking at what we're covering today. And in today's session, we're taking a look at the um, paragraph 3 in report writing. Then we look at something called descriptive dialogue. Now, that's my term, descriptive dialogue, because I needed something short to fit on the screen. I'll explain what that is all about. So it's a continuation of our discussion. We started on dialogue a couple of weeks ago, and most recently last week we touched on dialogue. And then we're looking at nonfiction comprehension again as well. Now, of course, I would say this is like round two in the discussions. So if you go back to the archives, you will see that the lessons, we've had a few discussions before on nonfiction and dialogue. And even when we looked at the 5 paragraph format for reports, we looked at those as well. So let me see if I could find the exact episodes for you. Reading nonfiction would be episode 4, and that would have been quite maybe May 2024 when we first looked at nonfiction, and we looked at dialogue first. At I'm checking through my episodes list here. Um, I know we looked at it sometime before, but I'm not seeing it at a quick glance. But definitely, we looked at it last week. So if you haven't seen last week's episode and you want to get some more information on dialogue, definitely go back to last week's episode. Huh. I'm still not seeing it, but I know we covered it before. But in any case, today I'm going to go through some details with you that would help. And I know dialogue is one of those areas where students kind of struggle a little bit with using dialogue effectively. Somehow we get one or the other extreme where there's either no dialogue or like half the story is dialogue. And we do need a balance to get the dialogue. But of course, as is my custom, before we get started, I try to do a little check in with other things that's going on. And today is Republic Day. Now, do you know what it means to be a republic? I'm asking you big and bold because I looked it up, so I actually know now. Funny enough, Republic Day is one of those holidays, the national holidays that we sort of appreciate the day off, but we don't necessarily celebrate it like the way we celebrate others. And it is on a national level because this is not a religious holiday. This is a national holiday pertaining to the country of Trinidad and Tobago. And it is the representation of our freedom to govern ourselves. And I think we tend to celebrate independence as that big separation from the our colonizers from before, but Republic Day is like the full stop at the end of that sentence of independence, because not only are we independent and free of external input in terms of on paper for the most part, we're also able to entertain our own elections and have our own government selected from within our own people, and not have somebody external appointed as a governor or appointed to rule over us. And so it's an interesting concept that I feel is largely lost on the population for the most part. I know it's something that's covered in social studies at various levels, but we tend not to focus on it as much as the importance of it suggests that we should. So I thought I should mention that, ask your children, do they know what it means to be a republic, and share with them some information. Make them aware that this is an important occasion. It's not just, um, a thing that nobody could really describe. There is a breakdown and an explanation. And actually, on the NALIS website, the library website, you can get some information on it if you're not too sure. So look it up and recognize the importance of it, because the having the rest of the world acknowledge that we are capable of governing ourselves, that's a big deal. Um, we with regardless of what your political persuasion is and how you feel about international interference, we are still for the most part autonomous, and that is something that I think is worth celebrating. Am I celebrating it other than mentioning it here? It's something that I'm still thinking about, so we'll stick a pin in that right now. um Last week I did what I learned this week, and I should have probably said last week, but I realized that this is a good segment because I tell you guys, when I do my classes and I interact with the students, I learn a lot about what happens at schools, because my students come from different schools. And I learn a lot about how students interact with materials and how they learn. And so there are a couple of things. Every week I learn a lot from my students, and I take notes, and it helps me when I'm sharing information with you during these lives, as well as when I'm preparing for new students and to really support the students in the best way I can. And so these are the things that I learned last week. And they're not necessarily new lessons, but sometimes when things get into a routine, we forget and we move on. And these are reminders. So the number one is great to have follow up and practice materials ready ahead of completing a lesson, but sometimes it's not always possible. And so right now, many of my students are actually waiting on me. I have a few that I'm going to be sending out today. So I'm appreciating the day to play catch up because I wasn't well and that kind of threw me off. So I'm now catching up with, bringing myself up to point with sending out materials. Um, and for the classes that I have prepared materials, it's easy and it's awesome, but sometimes I modify the details based on what's happening in the class, and that means I have to modify the assignment. So it's not always possible to have things ready ahead of time because I really tailor my classes to the students. So I'm still coming to terms with that whole process because once I have it prepared, it's easy to modify, but sometimes the modification means creating a whole new worksheet. I love that because that means I get nuances and different ways to share, but it also kind of creates a little lag sometimes if I'm, not well and so on. The other point came up when I was doing, actually, most of my classes, this happens. When I ask students, what do you think? Or what are your thoughts on this? What ideas do you have? Sometimes and few students would jump in and share, but the majority of students, and I would say like 90%, so 9 out of every 10 students that I have don't readily respond. If I don't call on them, they don't answer. Some of them raise their hands from time to time, but overall, they don't answer directly. And then if I call on them, sometimes there's a hesitation. Now, being in my class, they're getting used to the fact of saying, okay, Miss, I don't remember that. Miss, I don't know that. And they're okay with saying that as opposed to just the silence. Sometimes it's just pure silence. Um, and they're also learning to make an educated guess because sometimes they don't know the exact answer. But if they pause, think about the situation, and think about the question, they can come up with answers that are correct because they are processing the details and reflecting on the details. See, that word comes up again. I'm not going to go back into my rant on reflective writing, but if you missed last week, then definitely go back to the first few minutes of last week because I really got into reflective writing. Because the more I look at it, the more I realize how significant it is. So that students need to be able to share their ideas. And I've heard parents say, well, okay, they can share it when speaking, but they can't write it. We are working on bridging that gap, but how many students can you confidently say share their ideas freely in discussions? And this is something that we have to nurture in kids because so many times they're told to be quiet. And we have this saying, children should be seen but not heard, and that sort of really muffles a lot of students. And so, how do we get them to share their ideas in a coherent verbal way? And then we can say, okay, now you have that, write that. There is a connection, and many times students either they don't want to write because of some you know historical reason, either they don't like it, or they have been traumatized in the past by writing things, and we have the world of negative things to say about it, so why write, why bother? um the idea is that we really do need to sort of pull it out of them and model it so that they know how to answer. So if I ask a student a question and they don't answer immediately, I give them time because they do need time to think. But after, let's say, about 5 seconds or so, 5 to 10 seconds, and they haven't responded yet, I would model the answer. So if it is you're thinking about this, this is the question, I repeat it. This is the question, and this is why I'm asking you the question. This is what I want to find out. And then I model the answer so that they know if I ask a question like this in the future, this is how they could answer the question. And I always let my students answer questions. If I have three students raise their hands to answer a question and they all have the same thing to say, I don't allow them to say, well, miss what he said or miss what she said. I tell them, repeat it. Say it in your words. Explain to me what you wanted to explain to me. And all of these things allow students to be able to clarify their ideas, pay attention to the details, and be able to express themselves. And this is something we have to teach. We can't just take it for granted that students know. We have to model and actually tell them this is how you can do it. And there are alternatives. If you come up with one, we'll check it out. But this is generally what is expected. We have to give them those expectations. And then this is something, the last one, sometimes practice can look like fun. I am reminded of that all the time because sometimes the ideas that I'm able to connect with a creative writing lesson, it works really well. And so it surprises me how much fun it is students, how much fun students are actually having when they are learning. But of course, we do need the follow up and the practice. And so I'm bringing myself up to speed with that. Because if they have fun and they leave it at that, then they move on and they don't reconnect. So we do have to do the follow up and practice. And that's one of the reasons why at the end of each of these segments, I make sure and I say, okay, this is what you're doing this week if you're following the program, because this is how you can get that reinforcement and make sure students remember what to do, how to do it, and so that they can do it when it's needed. All right, so that's enough of my intro and everything else but what we're talking about presentation. So now we're going into report writing. And so far, at this point, students should be aware of the 5 paragraph format. They should be aware of the different types of reports. And we've also looked at background skills like reported speech, which is a big deal. And you would see it will come up over and over and over. So reported speech is important. Passive voice is also important, not as frequent as reported speech, but it's useful. And, transitions and all those other things, right? And so at this point, we're looking at the paragraph 3. So we've also done paragraph 1 and 2, what they should look like, what it is students need to pay attention to in those sections. And now we're on to paragraph 3. So what is in paragraph 3 exactly? Paragraph 3 has what happened during the main situation, where were participants and what did each do, and what was said. So I'm including that, and here is where you want to use the reported speech, but these are the things that you're discussing. Excuse me. And you may have heard me say a few times, because it's an important point, we really want students to outline details and not give general statements about what it is happened. And here, most definitely, is where details come in more handy than anywhere else, because students can get tempted to just give a one line of what happened, and then they end up adding in all kinds of other details. And so the paragraphs don't flow properly, and they end up putting information in paragraph 3 that should really have been in 2 or 4. And so the only way to really have a robust, complete paragraph 3 is if the students go into details. And going into details with the incidents and accidents sometimes is a bit challenging. So, one situation in particular is like when a student has a fall or some kind of injury, and that's what students put, at approximately such and such time, student was walking and fell, and that's the whole explanation of the incident itself. But there are other details that could be included in a case like that. And if you're focusing on the main situation in an incident with a student who had a fall, then you want to look at, okay, where were they walking exactly? We want to get details about that. What was happening around them? Um, Also, what caused them to fall. Now, of course, you're not going to say this is what caused them to fall, but you have to look at, okay, did they bump into someone? Did their foot or both feet, you know, hook on something? Was there like a sink or a depression? Did a foot slide off a step? um what exactly are the step by step details? And in order to do this with the paragraph 3, notice I mentioned main situation. Of course, students need to be able to identify what is the main situation. We looked at that before. That was part of the planning process, but it's something that needs to be reiterated, especially within the context of adding details. And so incidents and accidents, we have similar considerations. Students really get confused when they're asked about the main situation for things like an event or a competition, especially like, let's say, a football match. What is the main situation in that? The match itself? Well, it's going to be really difficult to fit the whole match into one paragraph. And so that's why I mentioned it last week, but it's something worth repeating. In competition, event, and activity reports, your main situation can sometimes be spread over paragraphs 3 and 4. Depending on what the situation is, one paragraph may not be enough to explain it fully. And so what you would end up with is the beginning of the main situation in paragraph 3 and the ending of the main situation in paragraph 4. And so you'd end up with like a two paragraph spread for describing the main situation. So it really depends on the type of report you're working with. But again, you're focusing paragraph 3 on the main situation. And the number one thing to remember is getting to the details. How did things unfold exactly? So, like, I think this week I had a student, we were talking about a student fell into a drain. Now, they mentioned that she was near the drain and then she slipped and fell into the drain. Now, simply saying that is not enough. Are we talking about, was she walking on the, near the drain? There's usually height of concrete or blocks or something, and then the drain, right? Was she walking on that, or was she walking next to it and then fell over all of that? What exactly was she doing at the drain? Was she alone? Was there anybody nearby? All of these things could be explained in what happened during the situation in that kind of context. And then, did she attempt to come out of the drain when she fell in, or did she have to get assistance? So the student had said, I think, when she came out of the drain, um, her clothes were soiled and torn, and that's what you observed, yes. But then, how did she come out of the drain? Did she climb out herself? Did she have to get assistance climbing out? And those kinds of things. So details, really looking at what was observed, practicing those details. And that is something that you can do with your child or your student just randomly, you know, paying attention to the details, and even you yourself in the discussion, identifying what exactly happened. So you could have as a running question, how did this happen? How did this happen? So she climbed out of the drain. Okay, how did she climb out of the drain? Did she get help or not? She fell into the drain. How did that happen? Did her foot hook in um, some branches? Did Was there like a sink or a hole that her foot twisted in? Was she walking on the ledge and then slipped off the ledge? So, details. How did this happen? So, just keep asking yourself how. And then, when you get all these details, determine which are the most important to include. But you do need more than one statement to explain what happened. And of course, what was said during the situation. Did the student say anything? Did anybody around say anything? When she got up out of the drain, did anybody say anything? All of that's important. And it's especially important for like events when there are presentations. It's not enough to say that the person presented on this topic. We need to give some details about what they said on the topic. So if there's a presentation by a nurse on, let's say, hygiene at school, we could talk about things like washing hands before and after eating. We can talk about throwing things in the bin. We can talk about covering our noses when we sneeze, using tissue and throwing things away. So we want details. It's not enough to say this person presented. We want details. And so when I go through this with my students, we brainstorm on the kinds of details that could go in, and I demonstrate and show them these are, we brainstorm, we make a list, and then I show them, okay, this is relevant, this is not as relevant, so you don't need to include this. And I discuss it with them to show them what works and what would not work as well. And so that is the kind of thing that you would have to go through. Is not appropriate when giving feedback just to say, hey, um, you need to add more details. Okay. What kind of details can I add? What should I leave out? Like, for example, I had a student tell me somebody's age um, in a report, and that information is not relevant. But they did not say what class the person was from, which is relevant if you're writing to a principal or a teacher. It's not necessary to know the age, but you need to know, is this standard 5 A, B, C, whatever the case is. You need to have the relevant and most appropriate detail for the purpose of the report, which goes back to, why is this person requesting a report? What are they going to do with it? We discussed that early on when we spoke about the reader of the report. And so those are things that you really want to pay attention to, because they help guide in terms of what details to include, what details can be left out. All right. And so we want step by step actions in chronological order. All right. So we want to know what happened first, what happened next, what happened after, right? Chronological or time order. We want to know the details because readers need to know exactly what happened. The introduction of the report already said that the report is about this thing, so they know that. So if you just repeat that, okay, this thing happened, not enough information. We want to go into details. How did this thing happen? Now, in doing that, of course, we don't want to put the adverbs and too many adjectives or anything like that. We have to be careful, but we do have to answer in terms of that step by step. And a reminder with this, in an effort to add in lots of details, sometimes students add details that they would not normally know. So one of the things that we are going to talk about this again when we deal with paragraphs 4 and 5, but students are notorious for giving punishments and stuff that happen in the principal's office. And you ask them, okay, were you at the principal's office? Well, no, miss. So then how do you know that? Well, miss, I find out. Well, how did you find out? Um, well, when the student came back to class, they told me. Okay, that's a valid point. You could put that in a report in reported speech, but that's not what was done. You just gave the information. So now we have to go back and figure out how to include it, making it clear to readers that wherever you were as an observer or a participant, you were privileged to certain details. And so we really have to be careful about, yes, we want more details, but how did we get the information? And that means a, it means a lot, because then students can add in things that they wouldn't know or they wouldn't have access to. So stuff to remember. So what are you doing this week? Um, we want to analyze situations to outline details. So this is something that really and truly you should be doing every week, all the time. Every time you go to report reviews or report writing, you want to look at the details and how details are expressed, how they are written in sentences, what kinds of details are included, what kinds should not be included, what is relevant, what is irrelevant. And then we want to practice brainstorming paragraph 3. So we want to get our hands on a couple, well, not a couple, we want a few. I would say maybe 2 prompts for each type of report, and just brainstorm and discuss the kinds of things that happen. And this is going to be something that you'll be doing periodically and over, because later on in the term, near the end, when we go again with the review of the types of reports and we come back to that, we're going to do that again, because it's worth giving students the knowledge of what could happen in certain situations, as well as how to express that in writing. Those are the 2 important things that you want to accomplish. So those are the objectives for every time you look at this and look at a particular paragraph. What details can be included and how to write those details in words and sentences that can be written and included in a paragraph. And then finally, once you have the time, you should set aside like about an hour, have the child write a complete report implementing these things. And so in this week, you're looking specifically at details. How do they include the details in the report, and did they include enough information? All right, so that is it for reports. This is what you're working on this week. And to assist you with that, as always, I have the 5 reports challenge where you can get report prompts. If you don't already have prompts available, you would get at least 21 report prompts here to start with. And then you can actually, modify these to create your own. This one has 25 prompts. That's the report planning worksheets. If you don't have a copy of that yet, you can get a copy, 25 worksheets. We have the long ones where the child goes through every single paragraph. And then I included a few shorter versions where you can do the quick notes, so that you want the child to practice brainstorming the whole thing to get their mind wrapped around how to do this. And then you want to have them practice that quick planning where they would just jot down the notes that would be guiding them. So between these 2, we have what, 46 prompts here that you could work with. So these are unique prompts. So it's not like 21 plus 4 over here. These are unique prompts that you'd be able to work with. So, and of course, there are notes here explaining how to do this, how to complete this, what areas to look at, and so on. All right, so something to think about to add to your resources as you work on report writing. Okay, so now we're moving on to descriptive dialogue. And again, like I said, this is my term just so that I could sort of focus thinking. And the whole concept of what I call descriptive dialogue is a way to add in descriptions with dialogue. And you can do descriptions of the character, you can do descriptions of the actions, which is the more typical one, but it's a way to use dialogue to enhance the story as opposed to just having the dialogue stuck there. Because I have to put dialogue, Miss, look, you see, I have dialogue. Yeah, we don't want it to be like that. It has to be integrated into the writing. And so one of the best ways to integrate it into the writing is by using that opportunity to do the description, right? So here's where you can get that option for description. Now, dialogue tags is like they said and different things. We could say whispered. We could make the dialogue tags descriptive in the sense that we don't always have to say said. We can say um, whispered or shouted or asked, or, we have different ways. But this is still limited to how the person was speaking in terms of whether it's a question or a statement or a command, that kind of thing. Where you get to really add in the descriptions with dialogue is in what we call action beats. Now, I teach my students this because it's important that they find a way to integrate the dialogue into their writing properly. And so we practice and I give them guidance and I model how to do these action beats because sometimes I've seen students where they would say, Sarah said, as she crossed her arms and stared at the floor, or they might say, Sarah said, crossing her arms and staring at the floor. Now, it's not bad practice, but I usually guide them into choosing it's either or. Either you do an action beat or you do a dialogue tag. It's not really a good idea to do both, even though it might seem like it's more, is not the best thing to do both because what you want to focus on when the character is speaking is what you put in the action beat. So there's no need to say Sarah said because that's not what you want readers to focus on. If you want them to focus on that, then say Sarah said full stop and you're done. But when you use an action beat, you're really directing readers to actions. Sometimes it's called descriptions as well, because I forget what they call it. It's a descriptive action, I think is what it's called. But it's because you want your readers to focus on a particular thing. That's why it's not advisable to do both. Either you focus on how they said it, or you focus on what is going on besides. And so if you notice here, there's some punctuation issues. I'm not going full stop, Sarah cross arms. This is correct punctuation. But when we say Sarah said, we have a comma. Dialogue rules is another thing that I share with my students. I give them a list of dialogue rules and we discuss that, and so they can practice it as well. Now, you can also use the opportunity to give a character description, where here you're talking about the character's hair. You think I care? Zoe flicked her dark curly hair over her shoulder. No, I don't have any, but we could imagine as a kind of, they flick the hand thing. But we're using the opportunity to describe Zoe's hair, right? And I'm not scared. Lucas tugged at the collar of his worn leather jacket to keep his hands from trembling. That tells us a lot. He's saying that he's not scared, but trembling hands. Are you really not scared, Lucas? Yeah, we don't believe you. We think you're scared. So there's a lot that can be done in this action beat section that allows the reader to feel like they are experiencing what's going on. Because when people are talking to us, we tend to notice things while they're talking, right? And so that action beat sentence gives an observation of what the character who is speaking, what they're doing while they're speaking. All right. And of course, this is something students have to practice. So when I teach my students how to do it, we practice and we talk about this a lot. And as I'm doing the creative writing drills, these are things that I'm reminding them of because, again, they have to be reminded so that they can include it and practice and get into the habit of doing it effectively. So What are you doing this week? You want to start by observing people as they speak and making notes. So have students, give them an activity. You're observing this person and they're speaking. What are they doing while they're speaking? So there are lots of clips online. You can find any kind of clip online, take a clip from a favorite show, a movie, whatever. And so just like maybe a 1 minute, 30-second to 1 minute clip, and you're observing this person is speaking, but what are they doing otherwise? And then you practice some action beats with that with the next session. So you do your observations first, and then you practice writing the action beats next. And then when you write a full narrative, you practice including the action beat with the descriptions and so on. So you could practice describing the character. You can practice describing the character interacting with the setting. You can practice describing the character's actions. So you have physical descriptions, interacting with setting, and then actions. Those are like the three main options for the action beat. And so that is something, again, you have to practice in order to get it done right. It's not just, okay, do this, and then the student suddenly knows how to do it. They're not in the habit of doing this because most times when students learn about dialogue, they learn he said, she said, and we said, okay, we want some more descriptive words than that. So we get whispered and shouted and lamented and lots of different ways of just the dialogue tag. Students can expand their understanding of dialogue by using the action beats. And it's a work in progress. They do it well in the practice, and then when they write the narrative, they kind of forget. So we have to remind them and then keep practicing with it. So just keep in mind that this is something that can really enhance their narrative. And so with this one, we have this is the equivalent to the report worksheets that I had mentioned before. This one, this one has 21. Actually, the other one, 3, 5, to 15. The other one had 18 report prompts. So that's 18. This is the one that has 21 prompts. It also has an explanation of subgenre, like different types of stories like fantasy, science fiction, and so on. An analysis of prompts so that students could determine, okay, what is the prompt telling me? Is it first or third person? You'd be surprised at how many students have challenges with that, and that could really cause them to lose marks. And then there's a self-marking format, so students can start taking responsibility for their own writing and start a self-check so they can make changes on the go as well. But we have to get them into that habit because, of course, writing has a process, and part of the writing process is editing. Nobody really likes editing, and sometimes it's very difficult to edit your own work. I mean, I'm a professional editor, I edit other people's work, and I can tell you when it comes to mine, I send it off to a friend to get feedback because it's notoriously difficult. So you do have to kind of like practice at least to look for certain things if there are areas for challenges that the student might be facing. All right. And so now, of course, to get any of these resources that I've spoken about before, you can just WhatsApp me. My number is there, 717-4993. Send me a WhatsApp message. I'll send you the bank account information. They're digital resources. So once payment is made and it's cleared to my account, I email you the information with your receipt. Okay. And so that's for reports and narratives. Now let's move on to nonfiction. So we're going on to comprehension, and this week we're talking about nonfiction comprehension. We've spoken about this before, but we need to revisit. Of course, you need to keep reminding students about these things and checking in with them that they're able to answer the questions effectively. So for this week for nonfiction, we're looking at, I guess I call them keywords. I think that's the standard term. When you have like literal questions where the information is directly in the passage, there are keywords in the question that students can look out for in order to find the answer in the passage. And so this is something that students would need to practice. Of course, there are keywords in all questions that will guide you toward what the examiner is asking about. But when it comes to literal questions in particular, you can actually take that keyword, go to the passage, look for the keyword in the passage, and you're likely to find where the answer is. And so that's something that students need to think about when they're thinking about finding details. Um, you also need to look at where do you find main ideas of paragraphs or passages, because main idea questions are unique to the nonfiction. Is not called the main idea in poetry or fiction or graphics. They ask the similar question about purpose and so on, but in a different way. In the nonfiction, you focus on main idea questions. And so, um, details, when you know, okay, it's a literal question, they ask about facts and dates and people, objects, actions, events, etc., then you can go directly to the passage and look for those. When it comes to the main ideas, you're thinking like topic sentences for paragraphs, that's typical, and thesis statements for the entire passage. Now, I know at this level, you're not really going to tell the student it's a thesis statement, right? This is between you and me because we're talking about how to guide students. Um, Topic sentences, first sentence in the paragraph, sometimes last sentence. It's a sentence that actually has the main idea in it. Found typically in nonfiction and in nonfiction formatted in certain ways. That's a typical structure of the nonfiction. And then there are like, okay, is this what do you call it? Is it like a report type thing? Is it like a descriptive type thing? Is it like a cause and effect type thing? There are different formats. And so learning about those formats could help you determine, okay, what that main idea would look like so students would know when they find it. And of course, this is something that I teach my students. We go into a lot of detail and we practice this quite a bit in terms of recognizing where to find the answers to the questions. And so the thesis statement is pretty much a topic sentence kind of sentence with the main idea stated, but it's not the main idea of a single paragraph. It's the overall main idea for the entire passage. And so being able to recognize that, and again, this is something unique to nonfiction. And these are questions that students can get about the passage, purpose, the reason for the passage being written, and they what's the sometimes they call it message. They also call it message in fiction. But when you see main idea, that is really for the nonfiction. So at this point, these are the things that you want to pay attention to. And so here's what you want to do this week. You want to read and discuss the nonfiction passages. So, yes, you're doing comprehension, but you want to focus on nonfiction passages. And yes, we did this before, but you want to do this periodically because you don't know if the student is going to get a fiction or nonfiction. And so, while you want them to do the whole comprehension in a practice test, from time to time, just focus on one of the styles of passages or texts that they would encounter. And so this week, look at the nonfiction. And you want to read and discuss nonfiction. So be careful with newspaper articles before I continue what I was going to say. Be careful with newspaper articles because remember, newspaper articles are generally written for sensational purposes to get people to buy newspapers, and so they sometimes use language that is inappropriate. So if you're going to use a newspaper article and you notice like a sentiment or an expression that's not given in reported speech, sometimes newspaper articles give direct quotations with quotation marks. That's not acceptable in the report as well. So you can point out those things that that's not acceptable in an SEA style report and still have the opportunity to discuss the article. What I would recommend is maybe going online and getting some, uh, you know, comprehension passages on nonfiction topics for kids. You could just do that search in Google and get a few, and that would work out pretty well just for the dedicated and detailed practice. You want to look for main ideas so you can get worksheets and practice activities. Again, there are lots of free places online where you can get worksheets for topic sentences and details and so on. So you could practice that whole looking for the keyword. But of course, remember, keyword search in a passage for an answer apply most to literal questions. When you get to inferential questions, you have to piece together an opinion from different parts of the passage. When you get to the evaluation appreciation questions, you're going beyond what's in the passage to your own thoughts and ideas and previous knowledge. So, keyword search is really literal questions, right? I'm emphasizing that because I don't want you to think that, okay, you can do a keyword search for all questions. Keyword search only applies to the literal type questions. And then, of course, you want to complete a nonfiction comprehension this week, at least one. If you can do more than one, that would be awesome. And the resource that I have for that would be this comprehension worksheets. There are 8 worksheets here, two nonfiction passages, two fiction passages, two poems, two graphics, and then of course it comes with answers so that you could check it yourself. You don't have to, figure out, okay, how do I get the answers to this? It comes with the answers. So if you're looking and you don't have access to comprehension passages, and consider these that you could work with. I am I haven't completed the last set that I have outstanding for my previous class. So I'm actually I have created the passage because what I do, I create these passages that so that they could kind of fall in line with what is in the exam. And so I have the passages created and I have the questions done. I just need to make sure I have the answers so that when, of course, I make it available, students would have answers to review right away. And if you're interested in the English language arts past papers, I have answers to those past papers, my answers that I created in response to the questions from 2019 to 2024. And that's something that you could consider as well, just to, get that practice. I think in the past papers, let me check. I think in the past papers, they are um, 3 fiction and 3 non-fiction, if I recall correctly. But there are some, you have at least 2 of each. And so let me see. Let me just do a quick check because I do have a breakdown of, let's see, how many fiction passages do we have? 2020 was fiction. 2023 was fiction, and 2024 was fiction as well. And so the others would be going back to 2019. So then yeah, so you have 3 nonfiction and 3 fiction to work with. So you do have those options. So you can get the past papers. The Ministry of Education's website has 21, 2, and 3. And then there's the 2019 exemplars and the 2021 specimen. I think there's a 2019 specimen paper as well. So you have a few options directly from the Ministry of Education. You just go to their website, Primary School Resources, and you can get access to those. So you can get like actual papers. Okay, so let's see. What did we cover today? During the situation, which is report paragraph 3, we looked at that descriptive dialogue with the action beat, and we took another look at nonfiction comprehension, reiterating some of the strategies that you're working with there to help students master the non-fiction comprehension. And so you have possible activities that you could work on this week. I do recommend at least 3 separate instances, 3 separate days, half an hour here, half an hour there, final thing, maybe 45 minutes or so, so that they could complete whatever activity, 45 to maybe an hour and 15 minutes, so that they can complete whether they're writing a report, a narrative, or doing a comprehension activity. So I hope this session was useful. And once again, happy Republic Day. This is Shelley Ann Edwards Barron signing off for episode 19 on our journey to SEA 2025. Be sure to visit my website if you want to get to see what worksheets and so I have there. I also have some games on the homepage, just at the bottom of the homepage. You can click and you'd open up a page where you can get some interactive online games if you're interested in that. So that, we want to make writing as fun as possible. All right. So I look forward to seeing you again. Hope you can join me next week. If you're not joining live, then please, I look forward to getting your comments and feedback on the episode. If you have specific questions, feel free to ask. I'm open to answering questions. You can WhatsApp me your question. You can message me on Facebook. You can type a question in the comment under the episodes, and I do check back from time to time to see if there are any questions that I missed, because I'm really trying to make sure that the sessions are as relevant as possible. So enjoy the rest of your holiday. I hope you actually get some holiday. I mean, yes, we want to do some schoolwork, but we also want to take a rest too. Okay? So see you next week. Bye bye.